Welcome to Mental Health Matters, a Cornerstone Behavioral Health podcast. I am your host, Caleb Folkerts, licensed psychotherapist and founder of Cornerstone Behavioral Health. This podcast brings you the knowledge, insight, and real human stories your providers wish you knew about mental health. In each episode, you will hear real conversations with the professionals who support mental health across the full continuum of care. Our guests include therapists, psychiatric nurse practitioners, primary care physicians, frontline clinicians, and leaders throughout the industry. Together, we explore their journeys into the field, the people they work best with, the tools and strategies they rely on, and the lessons they have learned from years sitting with clients during some of the most important moments of their lives. If you want to understand your own mental health more clearly or find the right provider for your needs, this podcast will help guide that next step. This is Mental Health Matters. Welcome to the session. All right, Shannon Gallagher, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a pleasure. I know you've been with us for quite some time now. I know we originally connected the earliest point in the career path with becoming a counselor trainee, and have certainly progressed past that. So very happy to continue to grow with you as spreading wings and flying in the field. I wanted to essentially start with some background. I think that a lot of times whenever people are either contemplating going into the field themselves as a psychotherapist, or if someone's maybe interested in potentially engaging with a therapist, some of the questions are not clinical, right, on the client's end. So, this is sort of whole theme is to just get to know you better as a person, to whatever extent you're comfortable sharing. But yeah, wanted to kind of get the narrative of just your hero's journey navigating from trainee to fully licensed therapist at this point. So, sound good?
Yeah, sounds great. I'm excited.
So one of the things I am interested in learning about is, before you became a therapist, who were you?
Yeah. So before I became a therapist, I worked for the child welfare programs here in Cuyahoga County. So I was working for Children's Services as a social worker, and I did ongoing work with families and children to help them navigate safety concerns that may be present within the family. I did that for about 5 years, and then I went into supervision. So then I was supervising the staff people who did that work with the one-on-one clients, and then kind of shifted into my internship toward the end there. So I was doing internship and that job full time. And then obviously I kind of made the transition here full time. But personally, before becoming a therapist, I feel that I had always been not therapeutic, but healing, I guess, for the people in my life. I noticed that I was very empathetic and warm, and I always wanted people to feel supported and that they had somebody they could talk to and rely on. So I think I've always kind of been the baseline of who I am as a therapist, but it's just about, how I came to actually developing the skills.
Yeah, yeah. So therapeutic before you were a therapist.
Yeah, in
Yeah,
a way.
awesome.
I would say that people generally found comfort coming to me about things, and helping them see it from maybe a different perspective, or, helping them to see their own strengths or maybe see where they could have done better. So that's always kind of been in my wheelhouse. Yeah, it's always been a part of me.
What early experiences, or I don't know if there's maybe specific moments, but whatever the case, yeah, what early experiences shaped you more than you maybe realized on the front end, that contributed to that journey?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things that contributed to where I'm at now is honestly working for DCFS. So when I worked for DCFS, when I first started out, I was very fresh in the field. I didn't know much about the world. And when I started that job, I became very aware of our societal issues and systemic problems. And I think that helped me to see people in a different way because it wasn't just about the way that they were behaving or childhood experiences, but also just adult life in general. I think knowing that side of things, getting to see like the systemic impacts, helped me to really shape my view of clients. I didn't really realize it at the time. I, of course, knew that it was a huge responsibility what I was doing. I took my job very serious, so it wasn't ever a situation where I didn't realize the gravity of it. But I think looking back, those earlier moments in my career had more of a lasting impact than I thought at the time. Um, I would say personally, a lot of my childhood, I struggled with anxiety and ADHD, and I still struggle with those things today. But I would say at the time, I didn't really realize it, but I didn't have a therapist growing up. I didn't go to therapy. That wasn't really common in my family. So once I started my career and decided that I wanted to become a therapist, I think looking back in a way, I kind of wanted to be that person that I didn't have growing up. And that person that I found later in life when I started therapy on my own. So I think, in a way that might have been a part of why I went into therapy.
Yeah, I appreciate the candidness. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. I know for most of us, there's skin in the game. Like there is something personal that something that we've overcome in our own lives, and usually that contributes to passion
Yeah.
points once you get the license. But yeah, so you were sort of out of the box. You were already therapeutic.
Hmm.
Have to be licensed to be a therapist, but don't have to be licensed to be therapeutic.
Right.
So you had that therapeutic bent, and then had your own personal struggles, like the culture that you grew up with. Get involved in working with children's services. That opens up the eyes as far as societal, socioeconomic elements that are coming through. I guess when did that become solidified in terms of like, this is the track that I'm on? So there's sort of this crossroads moment that we all get to where it's, I could be a lot of things. Maybe I could be anything, but I could be a lot of things, but I'm going to be this. So like, what was maybe when that started to crystallize and become the path that you've gone down?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, when I was in my undergrad, this is maybe getting into like kind of what led me to therapy.
Mm,
But when I was in my undergrad, I majored in nursing and
mm,
I minored in psychology. And then eventually I realized that not only was I better at my
mm.
minor than my major, but I also enjoyed it so much more. So at that point, I decided to make the switch. And then once I learned about the options about careers within psychology, therapy just became the natural progression for me. Of course, then I took a big gap between my undergrad and my graduate degree. So in that time frame, to kind of show you, I guess, how I got to that point, I didn't realize I was graduating early. So, because I had switched my major and I had taken, various classes, I didn't know what it would look like once I actually made the switch with my major. Once I did, I was told by my advisor that I would be able to graduate a whole year early, which I don't know how that was even possible, but it was. And at that point, it was probably fall semester of my last year, about halfway through, like kind of getting toward the end of, or like maybe November, December. And at that point, I didn't really know what I was going to do because I didn't plan to graduate right away. I would have already planned to study for like the GRE or started applying for grad schools, but I didn't really have a plan at that time. So that's kind of what led me into the children's services realm. So then I took a big like gap in between there. And what
Mm.
led to it was I had always planned to go back to school, but I did want to get some years under my belt working with DCFS before applying. And I think that helped me a lot in my career, especially in the order that I did those things, because I was able to view things in a totally different way going into my counseling program. So I was able to see these socioeconomic and systemic issues that clients encounter before ever encountering clients in a therapeutic way. So that's helped guide and shape the way that I view clients presenting concerns, of course. I guess like when I was trying to decide what I was going to do, because I had always had that like therapy aspect in mind, I hit a point where I was unhappy with where I was at Children's Services. And I wasn't loving what I was doing because I knew that I was meant for something more than that. I knew I wanted to be a therapist. And of course, nobody wants to see a DCFS worker show up at their house. So no one's excited to see me. No one wants to work with me, at least originally. Maybe once I build that relationship a little bit more and show them that I'm really there to help them, that's kind of when it develops more. But even still, nobody wants to see a DCFS worker on their doorstep. So it kind of got to the point where I really wanted to work with people who were excited to see me and excited to receive the help that I wanted to give. And at that point, I kind of hit this wall of like, if I don't make a move to change what I'm doing, I'm not going to be happy in my career. And so that's kind of, in a roundabout way, that's kind of what made me, switch over to therapy. There wasn't necessarily like a breaking point for me, but it was one of those moments where I was like, I know that I'm meant for more than this. Um, and so I did. I went for it.
Yeah, good on you. Good on you. How would you say, like, having that exposure, so sometimes you do have students going through like clinical mental health counseling tracks, and maybe there isn't any, previous exposure to really anything like healthcare related, human services related. Doesn't mean that they can't become a quality therapist, but obviously to your point, like the things that you experienced contributed, like shaped who you are as a licensed therapist now. So
Yeah.
I guess what do you think that resulted in, like specifically? So clearly it's been a boon, it's been an aid, but yeah, how do you think that kind of impacts when you're in session with clients?
So, as far as the impact it has, one, I would say I'm very resourceful. So, because I had to be resourceful working for Children's Services, to connect people to resources within their community, that has helped me a lot with my current clients in therapy. So I have connection to a ton of resources in the state of Ohio, specifically Cuyahoga County, but because of my quick thinking, the out of the box creative kind of problem solving, I think
Mhm.
that's bled over into therapy. So I've been able to, even if a client doesn't live in Cuyahoga County, or they don't like live in an area that I'm familiar with, I still have those skills to be able to help them locate those places. So I would say one, it helps me become very resourceful for my clients, which just helps them to gather, necessary things for their families, their children, themselves, whatever that might look like. But it's also helped me to understand, I guess, if a client is going through like a children's services situation, or they're going through a legal issue for, let's say they're on probation, I understand those areas of need.
Mhm.
I have a lot of knowledge on how those things work. So when a client is struggling with something and they're not sure how to proceed, I can usually help direct them on who to reach out to. So if they're on probation and they're having trouble getting in touch with their probation officer, I can help them locate, that person's supervisor, which I realize isn't like that resourceful, I guess, but like knowing the routes of who to contact to help them get in contact with people, knowing the right questions to ask, and knowing, I guess, how to help them navigate these challenges. That's become really prevalent for me. And it's been
Yeah.
more recently coming up with clients where I've been able to help them navigate through challenging like legal situations. Of course, not giving legal advice, but just helping them to find the
Mhm.
right people to talk to get that legal advice, or
Sure.
just things like that. I feel like at this point I'm rambling, but on a more personal level, I think it helps me to just see the client in a more well-rounded way.
Mm.
Um, I think, of course, it doesn't change whether or not you can do this job by having that exposure to those systems and those things, but it just helps me, I guess, view it from a different lens.
Yeah, because there is sort of like an in a box, just the therapist and the client, and that's where the good work is done as far as therapy. But it's not where the client ends. So yeah, being able to take
Yeah,
someone in holistically, like seeing like the additional systems that they're a part of outside of the box of like you and them. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, definitely see a lot of benefit there. Very glad that you pursued the therapist route. But respect to the roots of where you started. Yeah, it's very hard work, very
yeah,
laudable work. So just yeah, thank you for the time you put in to that end with children's services. But glad that you found what feels more like home as far as
yeah.
what you're doing. I guess kind of transitioning into talking about your therapeutic work. Um, Feel free to answer this as if potential clients listening right now. But just how would you describe your therapeutic style in a sentence or two?
I would say that my therapeutic style is very warm. I try to use humor to connect with people originally. I would say that my therapeutic style is like gearing it more toward couples work, I guess, like because I do different work with obviously different populations. So, in my work with couples, my process looks a little bit different than with individuals, but my general personality, I feel, stays the same. And I think that I'm pretty warm. I'm very welcoming and inviting and non-judgmental. I think it can be really difficult to share some of the things that people have been through. Some of the stories I've heard, I imagine, can be debilitating to discuss with someone I don't know. So, my approach is usually to help them feel that what they're going through, although may not be something they want to experience, that it's okay that they're experiencing that and that there are ways to improve on those things. And there are areas for improvement and there's skills we can use to improve whatever we're going through. Um, so I would say that's kind of a recap. I know that wasn't two sentences. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. That's fine. Just a creative box. Yeah, not a mandate. So within that framework, that warmth, the humor, like you as a constant, but fitting in with all the different individuals that you're working with. What would be like the guiding philosophies? So if someone's engaging with you in treatment, what typically are you breaking down as far as, mental models, philosophies, modalities? What or maybe sort of some of the jargon terms, and then maybe breaking down just into layman's terms, like what does that actually look like? What does that feel like with you?
So, my main therapeutic approaches are the work from the Gottmans, dialectical behavioral therapy, person centered therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, and motivational interviewing. So, to those who might be watching who aren't familiar with those things, what that looks like is, there's a variety of approaches that I use, right? So, um, with couples specifically, I would say that's where my primary passion point is. So I'll talk about couples specifically, and then if we have time, I'll talk about the individuals. Um,
Mhm.
but with couples specifically, Gottman is my main modality that I use. So Gottman therapy is very specific and it's very skill based for couples. So it works very well. There's a lot of data, a lot of research surrounding that modality. So that's my number one approach. Number two would be dialectical behavioral therapy, which I think is pretty ingrained in the Gottman process, just because they have terms like flooding, which For those who don't know, that is pretty much when, you're having an argument with your partner and your emotions become so elevated that your heart rate's going off like crazy. It's, elevated. You're not able to control your emotions. You might be saying things that you don't mean or that you don't want to say. So
Mhm.
flooding is a really common term that the Gottmans use to describe that experience. And in order to combat that, we use a lot of dialectical behavioral therapy techniques. So I use a lot of that mindfulness, that awareness of our own emotions and committing to our emotions as a form of therapy with my clients. So, there's a lot of DBT within the Gottman work, like I said, so they blend together very nicely. It's very, DBT is also very relationship focused, so it kind of blends well with the Gottman work. Acceptance and commitment therapy and MI are also kind of mixed in there to help people, find that motivation. What motivated you to come here today? What motivated you to address this issue in the relationship? Finding those motivating factors and building upon those within relationships are great ways to help keep them going and help them keep working at the skills that they learn. And I would say acceptance and commitment therapy is kind of exactly what it sounds like. You accept and commit to your experiences and to your worldviews. So accepting that something happened in the relationship that really put a detriment on it. Yeah, like it isn't comfortable to accept it. But once we're able to move on. So a part of the Gottman's process is accepting that there are going to be unsolvable issues in a relationship. And
Hmm.
that's okay. But learning how to accept them and use acceptance and commitment therapy to accept those things and build upon those things and maybe build upon the strengths that help minimize the impact of those unsolvable problems. That's where I find the balance, I guess, between all of them.
Yeah. Love that. And I know, yeah, couples big passion point. On the individual level, I know you do see individuals as well. Similar answers. Just wanted to give you opportunity. You do not have to have deviation. I know the Gottman piece is more specifically for couples. That doesn't mean that we can't provide like education, of course, like on Gottman clinical knowledge, because somebody might be coming to us with relational issues even though their partner's like not in the room. So
Yeah.
even in a one-on-one, that knowledge can still come out and thread into what you're doing. But yeah, anything that you'd want to cater to the individual, as far as kind of same question.
Yeah, so I would say my modalities kind of apply individually as well. I would say my most common, I guess, passion point within individuals is working on building relationships. So because I love the couples aspect, that's a really strong passion point within individuals is helping them feel empowered to manage connections and relationships, even if it's your boss, your sibling, your partner, whatever person in your life that you're having trouble with, relationship wise. I love helping people work through those because I think those Gottman skills and the DBT, the acceptance and commitment therapy, motivational interviewing, oh, and person centered, of course, all of those things tie together in both ways. So I do those things with couples, but also with individuals. There's a lot of overlap. So all of those Gottman skills, even though they're mostly partnership based, a lot of them are applicable to working with somebody like your boss, of course. So helping people work through relationship issues, like I said, it's my big passion point. But also focusing on trauma,
Hmm.
accepting and committing to those things, same kind of modality, acceptance and commitment, dialectical behavioral therapy to help manage those strong emotions that come with trauma, to help manage some of those more panic symptoms and to manage sleep. DBT is
Hmm.
great for all of those things. So, DBT is very heavily involved in both the individual and couple side of things. Working with individuals, I would say motivational interviewing and DBT and person centered are my strongest
Hmm.
modalities.
Yeah, I really appreciate clarification. on those modality pieces and those philosophy passions. So sort of within that box that we were talking about of you and the client, obviously there are no individuals, even twins, that are exactly the same, right? And so within that framework of novelty, between individuals, there's still overlap that we tend to see as far as like certain characteristics maybe resonating, therapist to client. And I'm curious, like, what do you think maybe are the characteristics of the clients that you work with that tends to add up to that good synergy?
The strongest connections that I have with clients are usually built on that openness, that honesty, and that commitment to treatment. So individuals and couples who are committed to practicing their skills and really putting in the work. Those are the clients that I see the most success with. So that also therefore makes me feel more motivated as a clinician. So if I'm seeing, that my client is really focusing on the skills that we've worked on and they're really trying to implement what we've talked about, that really motivates me to be the best that I can be. And if something isn't working, that motivates me to try to even, figure out more options. And if I don't know what's working or not working, I can't help guide the treatment process. So having clients who are open and vulnerable and honest, even though it's hard, those are my most ideal clients. And specifically with individuals, I don't want to pepper anyone with questions. So I want clients to come to session and kind of freely talk about what's going on. I don't want to sit there and, ask a question, they answer. I ask another question, they answer. I work best when people kind of just free
Mm.
flowing talk and, just kind of let me in on what's going on. I think that's one of the best ways for me to get to know people and to get to know maybe what's going to help them.
Yeah, love it. So transparency, engagement, willingness. Yeah, those pieces stood out to me from your answer. Hopefully that was a good synopsis.
Yeah.
So within the work that you do, you've talked about the modalities that you tend to synthesize. The Gottman element, the DBT element, ACT, and so forth. I guess within that, right? Because we sort of within each modality, we know that there's interventions, like right. That's sort of the atomic level, if you want to put it that way, of like client interaction, of like the thing that actually moves the needle to helping someone get from like point A suffering to point Z, betterment. So we all have, within our tool belts, our favorite tools. So I guess, maybe picking one or two, if I was interviewing one of your clients, or if I interviewed, 50 of the clients you've worked with, like what would be the average that they would say, this is a classic, Shannon Gallagher intervention. Like if you work with Shannon, you're absolutely going to be doing this, or this, and then maybe just providing a breakdown for those that might not be aware of, the jargon of it. But yeah, what are those interventions? What does it look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, all of my couples know that we are going to be talking about I statements. That is like the number one thing that the Gottmans talk about. And my clients will also know that in addition to the I statements, my couples will know that I always recommend asking more questions. So, being curious about your partner, and the same thing goes for individuals. So, my individuals are going to also learn the I statements because I find that, like I said, a lot of people come to counseling to talk about relationship challenges, whether it's with a partner, with a boss, a sibling, a parent, whatever that looks like. And my individuals are definitely going to hear from me what the Gottman I statements look like. And they're definitely going to be told, maybe we need to get some more questions in there. Maybe we need to ask, where they might be coming from on this particular issue. So that's one of them. And then another thing is definitely going to be mindfulness, and reframing. So mindfulness is going to talk about focusing inward and focusing on our physical sensations. So working on acknowledging thoughts and allowing them to pass is what I kind of tell people. So whenever we think of mindfulness, typically what I kind of joke about with my clients is that we imagine some, wise old man with a long beard sitting on top of a mountain with his legs crossed and his fingers like this going, and he's not thinking about anything. And that's just not what mindfulness is, even though that's what a lot of people think it is. So explaining what mindfulness really is, which is, allowing yourself to have thoughts, allowing ourselves to, think of our running to-do lists and all the things that we have going on in our lives, but refocusing back on some sort of physical sensation within the body or imagining, those thoughts disappearing, whatever that looks like for the client. So mindfulness, I statements, and then the last thing is going to be the big one, which is reframing. So I do a lot of reframing on negative self-talk. So if I have a client saying, I'm stupid because I can't pass this test. Something that we might talk about is, okay, let's come up with a way to reframe this, right? So maybe you can't pass this test now, but you're studying, you just, got a tutor or you just bought a book on this topic, and I might not be able to pass it right now, but with these skills, with practicing, with doing all the things that I'm doing to try to pass this test, maybe I will pass this test. Maybe not right now, but maybe if I keep working at it, I'll be able to. And that mindset is life altering. Like just changing those little sentences throughout your day can make you feel more empowered to do anything. And from there, it just kind of snowballs. So mindfulness, reframing, and I statements are my big ones.
Can you unpack a little bit more of like the I statement piece? Because I think that that is one, it's the first one you led with. Two, 100% agree. I also do couples work, and I think that that's the one that I always lead in with. But I know that it's also a foreign concept to those that are just not in the world of psychotherapy.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I statements are basically a way to soft start up a conversation with a partner. Like I said, whoever you have a conflict with, it's a way to utilize that as a soft startup to hopefully minimize the level of conflict or like more negative emotions like anger, frustration, things like that. So basically, an example of that could be something like, let's say your partner is going out after work a lot with their coworkers and they're not coming home and eating dinner with the family at night. So, an example of using an I statement in this scenario could be, I feel very sad and disconnected from you when you go out with your coworkers after work a lot. And I'm glad that you're going out with your coworkers because that is great. I'm happy that you have good relationships with them. I'm sure that makes, your work more enjoyable. But I would like for us to spend more time together as a family. What do you think about, designating specific days for you to go out with your coworkers or designating specific family nights? And then kind of waiting to hear what they say. So within that I statement, we're saying how we feel. We're owning the emotions that we feel as a result of something that they have done, but not necessarily pointing fingers or blaming. There's still some you in there. I try to avoid using the word you. Um,
Hardest
but
thing.
it's kind of
Hardest thing.
unavoidable sometimes. So, with clients, I try to start there. So, trying to use as minimal use as I can, or like trying to start with, I feel sad when the person I love isn't coming home for dinner with our family. That's a little bit further. It's a little bit harder to build on those. So, we just kind of start with owning emotions, owning how we feel, and what we need to see to correct that moving forward. So, like coming up with a solution to the problem. So, telling them how you
True.
feel, trying to avoid using you, trying to avoid pointing fingers, using, um, you know, language that might be, more charged. Um, validating, hey, I understand why you might be doing this thing that you're doing. I understand why you're going out with your coworkers because it's fun. It's great. And allowing them to know that you understand, but that you need something on your end. And that's kind of where I see the most progress with people, is being able to identify how they feel and what they need in order to not feel that way anymore or to improve on that feeling. Um, so yeah, does that kind of give you a better idea of an I statement?
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Well done. Well done. And I know we're
Yeah.
coming up on time, so certainly not the last
Yeah.
of Shannon Gallagher. But for now, where can people, go to learn more about you, about your work, about what you do?
Yeah, so you can visit our Psychology Today profiles and take a look at my, kind of responses there and my modalities. I would say the podcast, of course, listen to the full thing. If you're listening to a short clip, like, if you can go and listen to the full thing, you can get more of an idea of what it looks like to work with me. And if not, schedule a consultation, reach out, and try to see if it's a good fit. Of course, yeah, you can find us at cornerstonebehavioralhealth.org and take a look at our wonderful clinicians' profiles. Of course, if I'm not a good fit, then there's plenty of other wonderful people here who you can choose from. Um, and yeah, that's just about it. So.
Shannon, thanks so much for your time. Looking forward to having you on again. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I'm happy to be here, happy to participate, and I'm hoping to be here again soon.
Thank you for listening to Mental Health Matters, a Cornerstone Behavioral Health podcast. If you want to learn more about our clinicians, prescribers, or services, visit cornerstonebehavioralhealth.org. Take care, be well, and we will see you next time.